Okay, so I'm pleased to announce I have one of the most well-read individuals on the planet at the moment. And for you as an audience who have been following me over the years and listening to me over the years, I have one fantastic guy who has got one very clear vision about the future of money. His name's Graham Cooke. I'm pleased to have him here today. Brava Finance is his business that he's founded. And he fundamentally is blazing the institution and institutional world of money and fundamentally digital currencies, with very much the foundation of that going in with stablecoins. So for you out there that don't understand it, by the end of this podcast, you definitely will, that will have a real clear insight to what this is going to mean and fundamentally the impact socially as well. So, Graham, it's a pleasure to have you here on what was the Silent Ego podcast, now rebranded as Tune In. So we have a new frequency, and I think that frequency is yielding that conversation around money as a new frequency.
Yes.
So how did it all begin, Graham?
Paul, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for having me on your podcast. And I do think it is a moment where we're reinventing money and we're reinventing how humanity will use money in a different way going forward. How did it all begin? I mean, for me personally, this idea began 10 years ago when I bought my first Bitcoin, and I learned about blockchain technology, and I jumped down the rabbit hole. It wasn't Bitcoin, it was blockchain. Blockchains reminded me of the 90s internet and the potential the internet could have for the world. When I first saw it and started to use it in the 90s, I felt exactly the same thing with blockchain. And that led me to just really think about how the next billion and the next 2 billion, the next 3 billion people would eventually adopt this technology. And that's what led me to dream up what Brava Finance is today.
That's fantastic. So, I have one of my questions today is going to be how you see the next century, because this is not a flash in the pan, is it? This is something that is actually going to really set a new trajectory of money, finance, how we live, how we work. And I think the big question for me, Graham, is how we value things.
Yes.
And that sort of psychological shift of how we perceive money today and what it's going to mean for the future. Can we expand on that as you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I look for frameworks to help navigate those types of big trend changes. And I think that humanity's experiencing actually a once in a 10,000 year shift. So I think it's not even centuries we're talking about millenniums. And really what we're looking at here is the moment we came sort of into the farming agricultural society, which was about 10,000 years ago, we really started to think about the concepts of property and shared resources and work and people doing work. And ultimately, that's where the concepts of property and money emerged from. And the reason why they emerged was that if you had spent a lot of time preparing a field with crops and you'd worked really hard on that, somebody just comes along and takes it. It didn't seem like that was very fair. And so we developed a concept of property rules and property laws and a concept of paying people for their contributions. And then we had lots of systems of order around that. We had feudalistic systems, probably not a very good one. We then evolved into other sort of forms of governance and protecting people and protecting property. But that kind of was all the way to where we are today. We kind of built on that system. And I think right now, everybody who's alive today is actually at the cusp of where all those rules start to change. And I think that we're going to be evolving into this information-driven society, and the concept of money and property will evolve rapidly in this information age that obviously is looking much more clear because of AI.
Interesting. Just from something that came to mind when I was, not necessarily over preparing, because I think like all of these sort of interviews, I tend to try and feel my way through it from a real-time perspective. But there's something that really is sort of, I'm beginning to sense is with this subject, and obviously what you're pioneering to that mad adoption, which I see coming quite quickly. new money, particularly what you're talking about with stable coins, which we can expand on. But the psychology of money and how we associate with it and revaluing the value of it as well, because you hear these sort of statements from time to time about tokenization.
Yes.
What does that mean in your world?
Yeah, so I think I talk about this in my book. I wrote a book a
Yes.
few years ago called Web3: The End of Business as Usual. And I described tokenization being like a shipping container. Prior to shipping containers, they were invented by a person called Don McLeod in the 1950s, I believe. And prior to shipping containers, what the world did for trade was they just sort of took that they kind of netted items up and put them in nets and then tried to fit all the nets together on a ship and on a train or on a truck. And it was highly inefficient. Over 25% of the goods were stolen, and it was just not very conducive to global trade. Global trade wouldn't have really happened at the pace it's happened at without the invention of the shipping container. And the shipping container was creating a uniform size of a box. That box could fit on a train, a truck, or a boat. And then you could put whatever you want in the box. So everybody knew the outside of the box was uniform. The inside of the box was whatever you want. You could fill it full, half full, a quarter. You could fill it with anything you wanted, bananas, microchips, anything. And so that was a transformative concept, and it tokenized, in a sense, it standardized or tokenized global trade. And so the exact same concept of tokenization is taking that container ship and applying it to money or things of value. And really what we're going to end up doing is we're going to tokenize all assets, all goods and services. Everything will ultimately be its own shipping container and built onto a global blockchain-based internet where we'll be able to do a lot of very, very interesting and clever things with that information and value.
So it's interesting. So what you're saying is we're setting a new standard. So we are setting a de facto standard of how it was to how it's going to be.
Yes. I mean, it's just like, I think finance has operated in a very non-standard way for
Mm.
a long time. I mean, at the end of the day, there's two parts to the financial system today. There's the banks and then there's the regulators.
Mm.
Those are kind of the foundations. The banks and the regulators have ultimately, or the banks have ultimately sort of developed their own bespoke way of creating financial products and services. And there have been some information systems to try and connect the banks together. SWIFT is still
Yeah.
the predominant system. It's exactly the same as it was 50 years ago. And so we've kind of been using this non-uniform and information system that was built 50 years ago, regulation that's sort of rear view mirror. And it's been incredibly inefficient, leaving tremendous amounts of money on the table. Over $5 trillion a year is made by banking industry in the spread between the borrower and the lender. The fees so the fundamental of banking and finance is ultimately people have money and people need money. People need money to do productive things with capital, from building a bridge, investing in AI, to buying a house. And people have surplus capital that they need to put somewhere to earn a return on. And the spread between that is $5.5 trillion a year because of this inefficient, ununiform system. And so
Mm.
we're going to do the containerization, the tokenization moment for financial services, and they'll be built on blockchain. They'll be tokenized by something like a stable coin. And that is going to create this sort of renaissance moment for finance.
Wow. The stablecoin, in many senses, is the pioneering coin or tool or system that is fundamentally laying the foundations for new world digital currencies to transact.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it is, I'd say it's been a journey to get to
Yeah.
where we are today.
Yes.
And right now stablecoins will be that. But to get to where we are today, we had to have, number one, Bitcoin. So whether you hate it, love it, don't get it, Bitcoin is the ultimate genesis of this whole thing. And what Bitcoin built was a very clever game mechanic for building a peer-to-peer money system. It birthed the concept of a blockchain. It created the incentives for blockchain miners to run their computers, to run the network. It created a sort of a reason to do transactions with people, created a form of digital gold and true digital scarcity. All
Mm.
of those were very important foundations for where we are today. And Bitcoin will always play sort of its own important role there. But really, I think where the second most important thing that happened after Bitcoin was we developed a blockchain that could be used as a decentralized computing system. A little bit like Amazon Web Services, AWS, but
Yes.
built in a decentralized system that specializes in legal and financial transactions. That is predominantly Ethereum today.
Hmm.
And that blockchain is what led to the ability to create a stablecoin. And a stablecoin is effectively a dollar or a pound or a euro that is a digital token that gets transported on a blockchain, but it's unlike Bitcoin. It doesn't go up and down. It's stable and pegged to the dollar, and it's
Mm.
pegged to a real world asset like a treasury bond, and
Mm.
that's what keeps it stable. That's what keeps it pegged to $1 of a digital dollar on the blockchain. Stablecoin is equals $1 in a fiat banking world, and these stablecoins are like the iPhone moment for
Right.
the blockchain, which was a hard to understand and hard to use technology prior to this.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it actually makes a lot of sense. And it feels stablecoins sound very secure in its form. Because obviously the crypto world, if you want to put that word in,
Mm.
is fraught with risk and there's so much sort of mixed press about it. But
Yeah.
what's quite interesting, particularly over the last quarter or last 3 or 4 months,
Mm.
is the adoption of stablecoins is becoming common language on a daily
Yes.
basis. And I noticed recently that the Bank of England are actually now starting to take sides. And,
Yes.
and it's actually so, pardon the language, black and white because they were
Yeah.
so resistant,
Yes.
even to the point where that resistance was coupled with almost true ignorance of the situation. This is foolish. We don't not doing this. And now there's a complete shift
Yes.
in a different direction. And
Yeah.
it's classic pioneering, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, every new technology is often fobbed off in the beginning as a game, as a
Mm.
toy, as something sort of silly. It's ridiculed. It's sort of ridiculed. It's ignored. It's then fought against, and eventually it's accepted.
Mm.
It's sort of like goes through this pattern. It's programmed into the system that everything goes through this pattern. What's so different about stablecoins and crypto and Bitcoin and blockchain
Mm.
is it solves problems that needed to be always sort of run by governments or run by a central authority.
Mm.
And we're now reaching a point where we've got a financial system that doesn't necessarily need to be run by a central party anymore. Now, I'm not saying that we go from full central bank model to nothing. I think central banks still play important roles in the sort of robustness of a country's economy. But maybe one of the principal roles that it's had to play is definitely, and it's definitely causing them to rethink what their ultimate role would be. And Andrew Bailey wrote this article in the FT this week. I urge
Yeah.
everybody to read it because it really did explain in a very rational sense how important it is to have sound money, and everybody wants sound money. But it did reflect on and acknowledge the fact that innovation is moving very quickly, and maybe central banking role will change with that innovation. So it's really we're no longer at the fight it moment, we're at the accept it moment. And this is when things will change very fast.
It is, isn't it? And I think it's like all things. It's not if, it's when. It's
Yes.
coming, and you can sense it weekly. So going back to the word, even the word stablecoin, you'd hear it once a month or once a quarter come up in conversations. Then there would be a lot of blind ignorance around the
Yes.
subject. And I think now the market is, all markets and people are actually becoming aware of it and educated on it and understand it. The other thing that really thought provokes me is the shape of banks in the future. Will they
Yes.
be will they be called banks? Because this is like a utility. It's almost
Yeah.
like becoming a digital energy system that actually is distributed in.
Yeah.
So the whole fluidity of money is shifting at literally lightning pace.
Yeah. Completely. I mean, banks emerged, I know it's an obvious story, but banks emerged to create a vault for people's money. And they emerged out of providing security and protection for people's money, gold and cash. And then they evolved into, well, if we're protecting this money and it's sitting in our vault, and then these people over here need to borrow, they need to borrow money. So why don't we intermediate that? Why don't we provide, the borrowing and lending of money, of capital? And so banks went into that next. And then obviously they've kind of evolved and squeezing more margins out of that. We've kind of ended up today with what's known as fractional reserve banking, which
Mm.
is really the principle of almost all our banking system today. And that's really saying that the bank is effectively sitting on let's say $100 million, but they can actually lend out almost 900 million. They can
Wow.
lend out 900 million of money from 100 million. It's about a 9-to-1 ratio in the fractional banking system. And it's kind of been gearing itself more and more over the years to lend out more and more. And I think the fractional banking system combined with the sort of money supply inflation that's going on right now is causing the sort of emergence of what will be a rapid shift. And then you have this new technology over here, based on stablecoins and blockchain. And I think this creates the sort of perfect storm of change.
It is, and I think that banks are, well, fundamentally could be looked at as technology institutions in some respects, because it is all engined around technology and digital. It's utilized digitally.
Yes.
So the traditional concept of a bank, I think, is going to, well, it's obviously just how I'm feeling about this, is going to
Mm.
disappear. It won't exist. Does that also mean that, Graham, that the mindset of, or the psychology of banking is going to shift? The way that we think about it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think banks will evolve. I mean, I'm not one to say they disappear altogether. I think they evolve their service offering. And I think, like you were just saying, they become much more technology companies, and then they will sort of, instead of sitting on the capital and mediating the capital, like we talked about, I think what they will end up doing is plugging into a blockchain and then providing a last mile service. So they will sort of be using AI to make lending decisions, or they'll be providing a great front end experience like a Revolut does, like a neobank does. And I think that they'll be, but at the end of the day, what they'll be sitting on is a global containership blockchain infrastructure for accessing capital or lending capital into the network. And so I think that that's where they start to evolve towards, and it changes a lot of their current roles and responsibilities, but also will reduce a lot of their inefficiencies that they have today as well. But I think that's how we'll see it. So I think the neobanks like Revoluts are
Mhm.
definitely the beginning of what that would look like, that
Mm.
shift. But we just see much more of that happening.
Interesting. And how do you see this impacting Joe Public, the sort of general society? Because one thing is clear, this is a very speedy process. You know, everything is getting quicker, faster. Decisions are becoming, hopefully, will become a lot quicker, almost instant.
Yes.
So, capitalizing sort of projects and initiatives, improving, the evolution of humanity is going to be obviously marching ahead at quite a pace when you've got this utility, this new
Yes.
currency, and you've got access to it. We're going to really shift quite a mile, aren't we? Very, very
Yeah, I mean, I
quickly.
think I think that what you'll see is sort of Joe Public is that we'll have a financial system that allows the saver to basically earn more on their savings, to make sure
Right.
their pensions are better protected when they get older.
Hmm.
And I think that we'll have a system that operates in real time with
Hmm.
a rapidly changing world. So if
Hmm.
we do end up with, massive inflation and the massive disinflation, you have this sort of like constantly changing environment, uncertain environment, your capital will be able to move at the pace of the change.
Mm.
And those that are sort of in the older system won't be able to move at the pace of change that's happening so quickly and getting faster and faster. And then on the capital access side of things, I think there are many things in the world that are severely underfunded. I mean, there's a global trade finance deficit of over $1.7 trillion. There's massive infrastructure inefficiencies in terms of, bridges, roads, hospitals. And then we get to AI investment, GPUs and AI infrastructure, energy infrastructure. And what a smarter system is able to do is focus capital faster into the right places, into the right projects. And if we create more liquidity for longer term projects, then we create the ability for more capital to focus into those projects. So I think we have a highly inefficient system today. Like I said, just this $5 trillion being extracted already, just not very well. And we've just got a mismatch. We've got 20 trillion euros in savings in Europe. We've got $20 trillion in savings in America. And we've got underfunded projects all here. And they can't meet each other. They're not connecting. And that's what the internet has solved for the last 30 years, is it's solved the distribution problem. And for 30 years, we actually haven't solved the financial services distribution problem. This is going to solve it.
So it's going to unlock it, really, isn't it?
It's going to unlock it.
And put it to work. It's
Yes.
very, very, very clear.
Yes, exactly.
So how do you see living, and, it's a sort of a left field type question, but how do you see humanity responding to this? Because this is evolution, revolution. We're actually in some respects requalifying for our lives,
Yeah.
and how it's going to really impact human beings on this planet,
Well, I talk about this in my book. I talk about,
Yes.
there is this once in a 10,000 year shift. And then I talk about in a more shorter time horizon, I talk about how the last 30 years of the internet has disrupted the demand side. It's disrupted how you accessed your email, mail, how you accessed your shopping, how you accessed your media, how you accessed, booking travel. It's changed how you've accessed things, demand side shift. And blockchain are going to do is disrupt the supply side. How do we come together to create things is about to go through the disruption that we've had for the last 30 years on the demand side, we have on the supply side. And that supply side disruption is ultimately the way we're going to work. I released my book on the day ChatGPT came out. It was FTX collapsed that day and ChatGPT got released virtually that day as well. It was a bizarre day. And what I said in the book is that working in the future will feel as much as being part of on a sort of Telegram group or a WhatsApp group. You'll be sort of collaborating and chatting, and you'll have this sort of intelligence surrounding you and supporting your ideas. And that's a lot what ChatGPT feels like now. You can be on your phone and you can be creating big ideas.
Yes.
And obviously you need to execute on those ideas. But
yeah.
I think we're entering a period where we're going to create things and we're going to have access to capital in a much more seamless way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people are not going to take a corporate job anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to see the rise of the solopreneur. We're going to soon see the first $1 billion unicorn solopreneur, single person who creates $1 billion business. I mean, we're reaching that point, and I think we're going to end up there. And it's going to be it's going to look roughly like working very closely with AI, collaborating within your ecosystem, and accessing capital pretty seamlessly into your system. And that type of new way of working is, I think, going to be the most revolutionary part of this.
It's fusing the two, isn't it? Because it's intelligence on demand, literally.
Yes.
But then the idea meets the money. So the money becomes the utility that fuels the idea instantaneously.
Exactly. And I think money has always been a really effective way of resource allocation. So should we do this really stupid project or should we do this really valuable project? And usually the free market and capital has been pretty good, pretty efficient at saying that's the better idea. Let's give that idea capital. It's been pretty good at that. And governments have to manage a budget, and they, whether they manage those budgets particularly well, it's another question. But businesses have to manage a budget. Individuals and families have to manage a budget. And so money and capital is a very good forcing function to making sure what you're doing is going to be valuable. Is it going to pay back in the future? And so I do think it will continue to play that role, but it will, as you're saying, it'll play that role in a more real-time way. It'll be
Yeah.
much more real time. It'll be, I need to unlock a small amount of capital to do a little, I need to do like a thrust in a particular area. I get access to a small amount of capital. I do that. I prove that. I unlock more capital. And it'll be more like that type of experience of creating goods and services and experiences, all sorts of things for people.
Yeah, I know. It's fascinating because in some respects, AI is leveraging us to upgrade, how we express our lives and our energy. The other thing that came to mind is, as you were talking, is Graham, the word money. Will it still exist, or will we find a new word to represent it? Because it's feeling very currency flowing.
Yes.
It's becoming very utility
Yes.
on demand. You can just tap in straight away and you've got your voltage. Do you,
Yeah.
do you see this language changing?
Well, I think the things that are happening with money is, I think there are three key things. I think
Mm,
first of all, technology is always been disinflationary. So technology has always reduced the cost of goods and services over
mm,
the years. And I mean, it's really deflationary, like crazy, crazy levels. I mean, because of Moore's law, where every 18 months we double the transistors, we can do more. How expensive was a television 30 years ago to
yeah.
today? It's just a massively disinflationary thing. What we're going to get out of AI, I mean, global trade was a big part of that before, but what we're going to get out of AI is another level of disinflationary. We're talking about tens of thousands of percent of disinflation coming into goods and services via AI. And because the cost of actually doing the work, the manual labor, or all of that just dramatically reduces. I always use SpaceX as a way of understanding massively disinflationary areas because you know a reusable rocket was always going to be the way to make space work at an effective rate, because you can't just like fly a plane from London to New York and then junk it when it's arrived in New York. That
Mm,
flight to New York would have cost you tens of millions per passenger. And so when SpaceX was created, they looked at it and said, 90% of the cost is human labor. How can we do that more efficiently? And then how can we make it reusable? And that's just an example of like massively disinflationary technology and what it leads to. The second factor is money supply.
mm,
Money supply is governed by central banks and by borrowing and by governments in terms of borrowing. Money supply is just going to keep on going up. There's going to be an effect between the disinflation of AI and the
mm,
money supply is going to be a strong relationship, because ultimately what's going to happen is people are no longer going to work in the same way.
mhm,
They're going to lean on the government for support in the short term. That's going to require more money to be
mhm,
printed. So
mm.
we're gonna enter into a cycle like that. So we're going to see, I believe, this sort of massive money supply of inflation, massively reducing costs of goods and services. So what does that mean for inflation? Well, does it continue at 3% or 10%? But there's going to be this sort of cat and mouse game. And then the third aspect related to that is around the whole notion of people collecting money for the sake of it. If goods and services are effectively going to come down to almost zero marginal cost, people aren't going to need to collect money to buy goods and services in the same way. And so it's going to change our relationship with money as well. And
Right.
people are probably going to be less obsessed with just collecting money
Yes.
and wealth. And it is going to evolve.
Yes.
But I still think it will continue to be a resource allocation system money. It will
Yes.
continue to say, these projects need funding. These projects probably don't need funding. It will continue to do that. It will continue to be an exchange for people's skills. And then we'll add on to that the AI economy that will do business AI to AI.
It comes back to the solopreneur, the sort of cerebral side of it. You can see how the human intelligence is going to meet technology and money, and how that's
Yes.
going to reconfigure itself in value terms. I mean, I talk in my world, which is, people development. I come from a headhunting background, and I can feel and sense that we are coming into a time of perform to your value, not your time, as an
Yes.
example.
Yes, exactly.
So we're going to sort of see this sort of manifest itself with new world currencies to sort of, what's your day rate? No, forget that.
Yes.
It's, where's your value? And I think that this is something that I'm beginning to sense now with the saturation of just about all markets. And, people, the jobs market, is awash with people. Jobs are kind of new roles are sort of functionally coming together, but old ones are disappearing with AI kicking in. I see the massive impact in this big shift. And obviously, Harvard putting the report out a few years ago now that 60% of white collar workers would become portfolio careers. So this
Yes.
whole impact of perform to your value, not to time, that's coming.
Yes. And which is a
Fraction,
much better place to be.
yes, and fractional working. So I think I coined the phrase the holistic enterprise. And I think that the stimulus of new currency is doing this. Obviously,
Yes.
AI is leveraging it at a pace. And I suppose the call to action from the human is get with it,
Yeah.
not against it.
Yeah. Completely.
Because, I know that private finance is, really prevalent in the market at the minute, moving from that, prevalent to dominant place,
Yes.
which is what every entrepreneur wants in their vision, prevalence to dominance. And I think that, as a person working for a financial environment, let's use that
Yes.
word, whether it's institution or institutional or whatever term you put on it, you can't afford not to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think the time versus value is a tokenization thing again. I
Right.
think people will tokenize their value
Yes.
and money and currency will evolve into the exchange of that tokenized value you can provide. Now, whether that's your digital twin AI or whether it's you're licensing your brand and every person becomes a brand
That's
and you're
right.
licensing that out. I think it all becomes a form of currency and money over
Yes.
time.
Yes.
And the blockchain will allow that to be interchangeable and exchange and create a value and a market price and everything. And it will come to a point where if you don't sort of get on the bus, it will get too far away. And today the bus is stablecoins. I really believe that today
Yes.
it's stablecoins. I mean, we're already seeing now literally thousands of new types of stable coins will emerge. So it's not just the dollar,
Wow.
but it's,
Wow.
the Walmart dollar, the Uber dollar,
Yeah.
the Starbucks dollar. And Stripe just announced this week that they're allowing any of their customers to create their own stable coin with reserve management and backing on the Stripe platform. And so every business using Stripe can issue their own stable coin. And so
Wow.
we're already seeing this sort of moment where we're creating all these individual different types of stablecoins with different type of rewards, different type of benefits of being in those ecosystems. I think the next thing that will happen is that will move to the individual. That will
Yes.
all issue our own token of some sort,
Yes.
and we'll all hold and trade and invest in
Yes.
this environment of these different types of like value-based stable coins. And there's a
Yeah.
project in America as well called I think it's called AIUSD. And AIUSD is the ability, it's a stable coin, a dollar-backed stable coin, but you own a GPU. Actually, what you do is you actually own a share of the GPU and you earn a share of the returns on it. So if you hold an AIUSD coin, you basically are earning about 8% right now
Mhm.
in yield, and you own a very fractional right of that GPU. And it's basically a dollar. And it's like, well, okay, I'm going to pay for my house in X amount of GPU dollars and Y amount of Walmart dollars and Z amount. That's how we're going to sort of evolve towards.
It's really, really fascinating stuff, this. But I can feel it makes a lot of sense. So I've got a good friend, Charles Clark, who runs an IP company, intellectual property,
Yes.
and he sees this, he's on a similar challenge. He's looking to, from an IP perspective, he's having he's having some interesting times and conversations now about, associating intellectual property with all sorts of different initiatives. But I can see this becoming quite
Yes.
trend as well, is protecting your asset value through IP.
Yeah.
Ideas have IP,
Yes.
you know?
Exactly.
So this sort of ethereal to material world where, we start with a thought, ends up
Yes.
as a product or a tangible, highly valued service of some description.
Exactly.
And
And I think IP it's a really good way to think about it. It's like, how do you tokenize IP? How do you put that on the blockchain? How do you
yeah,
fund it? How do you trade
yeah,
it? How do you
yeah,
buy it? All that
yeah,
type of stuff, license it. That's going to
yeah,
be a huge amount of currency will be based off that. And I think you start to break down the building blocks of, like, you have IP, you have knowledge, you have wisdom, you have resources. You start to break these components down, and everything becomes like mini container ships of all these different building blocks.
yeah. It's like cellular sort of energy system, isn't it?
Yes.
It's, and then expressing it. It's super cool. If you think about it, very, very bordering sci-fi, but equally, if you think about, I go back to the human brain. We're not, we only use a certain percentage of our brains. So evolution has prepared us for this,
Yes.
that's given us extra capacity and, a structure that says, look, in time, this is coming.
Yes.
And, this time is now. I mean,
Yeah.
I can feel it. And going back to Brava Finance and, the curve you're on right now, I'm sure that you're, pointing towards quite a healthy 26. I would see that, I know you've pollinated the
Yes.
market really well, and those educational,
Yes.
tutorials you've been giving have been very powerful. And I think, you've got the early traction now to sort of,
Yes.
the adoption cycle's coming.
Yeah.
But like I say, if I was in a banking position right now, we can't afford not to go with this. We've got to move with it.
Yeah, we've been working with wonderful customers.
Mm,
We're still in private. We've been working with them to understand how they understand this next form of finance, this next form of banking, and
mm,
how to actually use it to their power of their investment strategies. Today there's almost $300 billion of stable coins. And about of that $300 billion ecosystem, there's about $50 billion, what is effectively private credit. It's
mm,
$50 billion market of people sort of lending those stable coins for different use cases. And what started off as being predominantly crypto backed loans. So if somebody had Bitcoin, they didn't want to sell it, they could they could collateralize their Bitcoin and borrow some stable coins. That's where it started I don't know, about 5 years ago.
mm.
But today, every day, there's 10 new use cases for borrowing stable coins. And it's the fastest growing form of private credit now. And it's crossing over out of the on-chain crypto-backed loans world, out of the providing capital to markets and things like that. It's crossing the Rubicon into the real world, and it's where businesses and funds are realizing they can get access to capital more efficiently at lower cost and more real time by borrowing in stable coins. And that's the revolution that's starting to happen.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's changing the face of has business has been done. So the world of business is changing.
Yes.
Um, probably once again the word may disappear, busyness, business.
Yes.
Because this is a very efficient way of doing things. So if you look at the outcome, we're going to save time. So if
Yes.
we save time, we're going to be able to reallocate that time for more meaning in who we are, what we are, and the custodians of this planet. Because
Exactly.
we won't be neglecting things that we've just, overseen because we're you know, too busy
Yeah.
basically to
Well,
care.
I think the system is just blocked. It's just
Yes.
blocked at the moment. There's just, again, the distribution problem. It's just that the people want to indirectly work together in the system, but they can't connect. They can't find
Yeah.
each other. And we
Yeah.
can't match lenders and borrowers at the most simple way of looking at this. We're not matching them efficiently. People are sitting on the sidelines. It's inefficient. And then and then the worst case, it's extractive. That inefficiency is extractive to some parties that can basically do very, very well out of the inefficiency there, which is a classic inefficient system. You have the extractive elements, and then you just have the inefficiency. That's what's about to change. And I just
Mm.
think with AI and unblocking these inefficiencies, things will move very fast in a very short period of time.
They're really, really, really interesting. So I think, look, it's like precision living is on its way, and how we sort of, in other words, we're all going to go through a big identity crisis. This is not who we are anymore. This is where we're moving to, which is going to be quite. quite a fascinating time to be alive, I think they call.
Yes. I mean, I think we'll have to spend a lot more time
Mm.
understanding our purpose, individual purpose.
Yes.
And I mean, it's certainly been part of my journey for the last 10 years
Mm.
is really understanding, not just about like what I'm doing and being busy and
Yeah.
building tech, but like, why am I doing this? And, what's my purpose in doing this? And what's
Mm.
the bigger purpose? And I think we're gonna spend a lot more time doing that. And then we find a lot more joy and satisfaction in our lives because we understand that.
Absolutely. I think it's a kind of like it's metamorphical, isn't it? In many senses, we're shifting ourselves to a whole new standard of existence
Yes.
and very much more purpose. I now literally daily, I ask the question, what is the meaning of this?
Yes.
And it's a bit like even this podcast. What is the meaning of this? It's to spread the word that there is
Yes.
new on its way. And, whatever your view, hopefully you've learned something from this, that the digital currency world is here.
Yes.
Stablecoins are fundamentally a vogue and are laying the foundations of the new world as we knew it, to how
Yes.
we're going to be perceiving it. So I think there's a sort of almost like a new consciousness arriving. And I think it's quite interesting about, 26, we do obviously at the final sort of quarter of 25. But where will we be this time next year? I mean, it's difficult to
Yeah.
predict, right? I mean, once
It
upon a
is.
time, you used to live in that world where, you could be pretty
Yeah.
specific. Now, a quarter feels like how long? How
Yeah.
many years
Yeah.
of
No, I mean, that's
change?
exponential growth. I mean, we're probably doing I always say that the next I always give the analogy that the next 2 years, 2 years forward will feel as different as the last 20 years back. That's kind of that's what exponential growth feels like. So if
Yes.
you can think back to 2005, I just started working at Google in 2005.
Yes.
The iPhone wasn't out. We all had Nokias and Blackberries.
Mm.
That was 2005. Well, the next 2 years, when you look back in 2027 to today, will
Mm.
feel like that. That's exponential growth. That's how
Yeah.
fast things are moving.
Wow. So I mean, obviously, as a visionary and, putting this into real, practicalities. How are you feeling right now, Graham, with the journey with Brava Finance? Feeling your way through this. And you know what I'm trying to say here is that
Yeah.
sort of you feel as though you're actualizing now your plan. Is it coming together?
Yes. I mean, I think, like I said, I've been thinking about this for 10 years. Um, I basically, it's my second startup. I built
Yes.
Qubit, started that in 2010, sold it
Mm,
in 2021.
mm,
And so this is my second rodeo in terms of building a startup and a proper startup. I did lots
yes.
of things, little businesses at school and things, but
Yes.
I think that, one of the things I really learned at Qubit was the importance of really working with your early customers very
Hmm.
closely and really understanding your users, who the right users are for the
Hmm.
for the journey, who the users are maybe will come to later on in the journey, and being hyper focused on getting the product absolutely right, and then building the inflection point off that. And so I've taken that as a sort of the core pillar of how we're building our product today, and a whole of the business is focused on that mission. And so, that's what we've spent the last 9 months really, really focused on.
Mm.
And now we've really seen that's click together. And 2026 is all about taking this out to the world and getting people on the bus for the next generation of finance.
Yeah, interesting. How do you see yourself in? I mean, it's an out there question, but how do you see yourself in 10 years? Because obviously you're still young and incredibly entrepreneurial. The success story, you're making history. There's all sorts of different metaphors you can put around this journey right now. And, even the short time I've known you as a company and as an individual, you're hitting the world stage now. You're making a real mark, which is fantastic.
Thank you.
10 years time, how do you see yourself, Graham? Because you'd be looking back at history, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what I look at I mean, personally, I think about my own development. I like to
Hmm.
learn every day.
Hmm.
I feel enormous purpose in daily knowledge and wisdom and trying to improve on that. And so I would like to have continued that journey on a daily basis. And then from a business perspective,
Hmm.
I will have seen Brava Finance reach a point where it is effectively like Uber or Airbnb. Or Airbnb is like the largest hotel in the world. Uber is the largest transportation company in the world. I see that Brava Finance would be the largest financial services company in the world, but we don't have any capital in our system. We're just rooting it from, we're completely non-custodial and decentralized, just like Airbnb has no hotel rooms actually, and Uber has no cars. We would actually have no money in the Brava Finance system. We're just routing it from the sort of the lenders to the borrowers
Yeah,
through the
yeah, yeah,
system.
yeah. I get
So
it.
I see
It's a transmission, isn't it? You're a
it's a
transmitter.
transmission system. Exactly. So
Yeah.
we're a routing system or a transmission system. We do that on the blockchain with AI. And so I see us being that for finance. So that's what I see in 10 years. So that would be, trillions of dollars in the platform in that sense. And then from a world's perspective, I am very optimistic about AI and blockchain in the long run, but I definitely think it's going to be a rocky path from where we are today to where we'll be in the future. There'll be ups and downs and complexity, but I'm overly optimistic about how it will play out for all of us. We'll lead healthier lives. We'll have more purpose. We'll be able to have and experience more things because of the disinflation. And so I just think all of those things are going to be so great, but we will go through an incredibly transformative period, and navigating that will be the most important thing. Being able to look after each other and help each other through great change. Literally millions and hundreds of millions of people will be changing their jobs and what they do through this transition. And so it'll be a very interesting. But I always look back at, let's say, 300 years ago, over 95% of people were in farming and agriculture. 95% of the global population was in farming and agriculture 300 years ago. And I think we'll say the same about today. We'll be like, 70% of people were sitting in front of a computer at a desk using a spreadsheet, and now it's only 5% of people do that, So I think that's the type of shift we'll see.
So we're moving sort of in some respects to a new level of consciousness and, how we exist. And obviously longevity, lifespans will be
Yes.
longer through the enablement, through funding, clearly,
Yes.
and also artificial intelligence, giving us more insightful data points to, quicker. So the
Yes.
whole pace of things will become more precision-like,
Yes.
and that pursuit of brilliance will emanate in the human construct. So we'll, as you said, free the blockages and,
Exactly.
create a more conscious creation society.
Exactly. And I think there's two frameworks. Like everybody knows Maslow's
Hmm.
hierarchy of needs. And then
Yeah.
there's also Claire Graves' spiral dynamics. And
Yes.
you take these two frameworks and they all start off with like, are your basic needs met?
Hmm.
Are you getting food, shelter,
Hmm.
water? Then it gets into like, are you getting family and social? Everything is sort of moving up either the spiral or the pyramid. You're moving
Yes.
up into a deeper form of consciousness, a deeper understanding of yourself. This is going to be a very rapid way of us all sort of being able to take a step further in our journey of understanding ourselves and our planet, our people in a deeper way. And I think that's that will be quite enjoyable. I think a lot.
I
So
think it would. And I think that
yeah,
the kind of phrase I've started to use quite a bit personally is spiritual intelligence.
yes, I
You know, but
like that.
spiritual intelligence, it will allow us to become who we truly are through a lot more meaning and purpose. And it's that, you know, feeling, adding that value, and equally at the same time appreciating you as a
Yes,
versus as a resource, if that makes
yeah,
sense,
yeah,
to be
completely.
used really. So revaluing humanity is all part of this journey, which is quite interesting. And So cerebral intelligence with intellectual property, and owning that's going to give some serious sort of, it's going to enable people to think about themselves in a very, very different way, which is
Exactly.
fantastic. But it's
So
all
I think
energy.
it's all energy. And I do think that I think that getting on the bus there, I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, it's all woo woo. But if you can get on the bus and really
Mm,
take that journey, that's going to it's going to pay dividends in many ways.
yeah, definitely. Well, this is great. And obviously, we just finally, as we come up to sort of, it's been a very informative conversation, I must say, very intelligent, very informative.
Yeah.
It's
Very
very
much enjoyed it.
holistic in so many different ways, as well as, technical, but equally, I know the book, I've read the book, and I know that I've attended a couple of your seminars, which are fantastic. Your tutorial is very informative.
Thank you.
Anybody listening to this, follow Graham, because he knows his stuff. And I've seen him in the room with some of the people that have really challenged him. And I think that, you handle that incredibly well and almost very factual, which is a bit unnerving.
Thanks.
So, how much do you really know?
Yeah.
And I think this is good. But finally, you touched on, you've talked about Web 4
Mm.
and Web 3, Web 4. At what point do you see Web 4? Because I see the two merging, like coming together.
Yeah. I mean, they operate like a couplet.
Yeah,
So Web 1 and Web 2 was a couplet, and Web 3 and
yeah,
Web 4 is a couplet. And
yeah,
and what I talk about in my book is the first version the Web 1
yeah.
is an infrastructure. It's like internet protocol and modems and ADSL. It's kind of like digging the roads.
Mm,
And then Web 2 are putting the houses and the malls and the shops on the roads. So basically that's kind of what always happens. It's like infrastructure, then application.
mm,
And then Web 3 and Web 4 is the couplet again. Web 3 is infrastructure, Bitcoin, Ethereum. Hard to understand these infrastructure eras.
mm,
And then along comes a bunch of houses and shops and hotels on top
mm,
of that, on that
mm,
road.
mm,
So Web 4 will be, you won't really know you're using the blockchain. Just like when you use an iPhone and you don't really know that you're using internet protocol and DNS and HTTP. That's what's happening under the hood. But really what you've got is a screen, it's connected to the internet, and you're pressing buttons. And it led to Airbnb, Uber, and all those type of businesses. So Web 4 is going to feel like that as well. It's going to be like using blockchain, using stable coins. AI will be the interface layer. I think that it'll be an audio action based, Meta just released this really interesting device last week.
mhm,
It'll be like this sort of audio visual touch, but in the real world experience. I think Web 4 will be that on top of a blockchain. So it'll be AI in the interface, blockchain in the infrastructure. And it will be a fantastic and interesting way of doing things, of
mm,
experiencing the world, of doing business, of creating things. It will feel so much more natural than
mm,
sitting at a desk with screens. And that's where we're going. So I think we haven't had our iPhone moment of Web 4 because
mm.
we're just at the beginning of the Web 4 phase. We're just at the end of the Web 3 phase. It's gonna be very, very exciting and feel very natural to the way we live our lives rather than unnatural computers and screens and things like that.
So it's welcome to the holistic enterprise and upgrading humanity on the journey, which is fantastic. Graham, it's been an absolute delight and pleasure to talk to you. And just touching on the book, is there a new book coming? Just for the
There
record,
is, yes. I just handed the manuscript in this week.
right? Good
Yeah.
timing. Yeah,
And I wrote this book with a great friend of mine, Dr. Alan Watkins.
right.
And the book is called Super Intelligent, Smarter Than You. And it's a book for business leaders to understand how to partner with AI. And it's not
Fantastic.
thinking about AI as like a tool, it's thinking of AI as a partnership. And how do you actually partner with AI? And it actually looks at some deep sort of levels of consciousness and even some aspects of spirituality and
Very
what is
good.
consciousness, what is AGI,
Yeah.
and I think it'll be a framework for understanding Web 4 and for understanding how to use AI in the future.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, education in a sort of an uneducated market with this subject is really, really required. And I sort of get out of jail when people talk to me about AI and what's your view. I say, well, I think we've just got to learn to co-create with it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think you're right. With that co-creation, we become consciously smarter
Yes.
and see it as a leverage of, saying, right, come on, guys, we've got to get off our backsides and do something with our lives. And yeah, so I think it's here for, obviously we've got to coin the phrase, it's for the greater good. So
Yeah.
the book sounds fantastic. So I can't wait for it to be hopefully
Yes.
published and read it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, great. It's been an absolute pleasure, as I say, and a delight. Highly informative. Thank you for the time and coming on the Tune In podcast, subsequently Silent Eagle. Definitely the soul of the entrepreneur with a real soulful spirit about you, which is fantastic. It's
Yeah.
great.
Thank you, Paul. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for having me on your show.
No worries. Take care. Cheers.
Take care.